Read words about old age, and your body will physically slow down. Hold a warm cup of coffee, and you'll judge strangers as friendlier. See images of money, and you'll become more selfish. These experiments were cited in every TED Talk, featured in every business book, shared millions of times as proof of how your unconscious mind works. They were also completely fake, and the person who admitted it? The Nobel Prize winner who wrote about them. Kahneman called his own chapter a train wreck. He fell for the exact biases he spent his career documenting. I analyzed what's left of thinking fast and slow. The answer? 93% is still brilliant. 7% is a lesson in humility. Even geniuses get fooled. Here's how to not make the same mistake. Book and author. Daniel Kahneman spent over 50 years studying how humans actually think. Not how we believe we think, but how we really make decisions. In 2002, he won the Nobel Prize in economics, despite never taking a single economics class. His crime? Proving that humans are far less rational than economists assumed. In 2011, he put 5 decades of research into one book, Thinking Fast and Slow. The book's promise. Kahneman's core idea is deceptively simple. Your brain runs on 2 systems. System 1 is fast, automatic, intuitive. It's what tells you 2 + 2 = 4 without thinking. System 2 is slow, deliberate, logical. It's what you use for complex math or difficult decisions. The problem? System 1 is running the show far more than you realize. And it makes predictable mistakes that cost you money, relationships, and opportunities without you ever noticing. Our promise. This book has shaped how governments design policies, how doctors diagnose patients, and how investors manage billions. But is all of it actually true? I tested 14 of Kahneman's core claims against peer-reviewed research, including studies published after the book came out. Some findings are bulletproof. Others have completely collapsed. Let's start with the foundation of everything, the 2 systems themselves. Is your brain really split this way? Or is it just a useful metaphor that falls apart under scrutiny? Topic 1. System 1 versus System 2. What the book says. Kahneman's central argument is that your brain operates on 2 distinct systems. System 1 is fast, automatic, and intuitive. It's what tells you that 2 + 2 = 4 without conscious effort. It reads facial expressions instantly. It makes you flinch when something flies toward your face. You don't choose to engage it, it just runs. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and analytical. It's what you use for complex math, careful reasoning, or any task that requires focused attention. It's effortful. It tires you out. And here's the problem. It's lazy. Kahneman argues that System 1 is running your life far more than you realize. Most of what you think is rational, deliberate thinking is actually System 1 generating quick impressions, and System 2 just rubber stamping them. You feel like you're in control, but your intuitive mind is making the calls. What science says. This framework didn't originate with Kahneman. The terms System 1 and System 2 were actually coined by psychologists Keith Stanovich and Richard West back in 2000. Kahneman popularized them. But does the science support this dual process model? Evans and Stanovich published a comprehensive review in 2013 in Perspectives on Psychological Science, analyzing decades of evidence. Their conclusion? The distinction between automatic and controlled processes is well established across cognitive psychology, social cognition, and neuroscience. Brain imaging studies show measurable differences. The default mode network is associated with automatic intuitive processing. The prefrontal cortex activates during effortful, deliberate thinking. Your brain literally operates differently depending on which mode you're in. The evidence is consistent across multiple fields: reasoning research, judgment and decision-making, even marketing and consumer behavior. Verdict: validated, with important nuance. The dual process framework is scientifically sound. The distinction between automatic and controlled thinking is real and well documented. But here's what Kahneman himself acknowledges. System 1 and System 2 aren't literally two separate systems in your brain. They're more like two modes of processing, a spectrum rather than a switch. And critically, System 1 isn't always wrong. In domains where you have genuine expertise, your intuitions can be highly accurate. Here's how to apply this. Before any important decision, pause and ask yourself, am I in System 1 or System 2 right now? If you're tired, rushed, emotionally charged, or multitasking, System 1 is probably running the show. That's exactly when you need to slow down and deliberately engage analytical thinking. The framework isn't about eliminating System 1. It's about knowing when to trust it and when to override it. Topic 2. The anchoring effect. What the book says. Here's one of Kahneman's most famous experiments. Researchers spun a wheel of fortune in front of participants. The wheel was rigged to land on either 10 or 65. Then they asked a completely unrelated question. What percentage of African countries are in the United Nations? The people who saw the wheel land on 10 guessed around 25%. The people who saw 65 guessed around 45%. A random number from a spinning wheel, something everyone knew was meaningless, shifted their estimates by 20 percentage points. This is anchoring. The first number you encounter influences every number that follows, even when that first number is completely irrelevant. And Kahneman argues it happens everywhere. In negotiations, in pricing, in courtrooms, in medical decisions. The anchor doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be there first. What science says. Anchoring is one of the most replicated findings in all of behavioral science. Furnham and Boo conducted a meta-analysis in 2011, reviewing 40 separate studies. The effect was robust across all of them. Epley and Gilovich documented hundreds of replications across different domains, and anchoring held up every time. But here's what makes this finding uncomfortable. It works on experts too. Studies on real estate agents showed that listing prices anchor their valuations, even when they claim they're ignoring them. Research on judges found that sentencing recommendations from prosecutors anchor final sentences. Experienced negotiators, doctors making diagnoses, financial analysts making predictions. Anchoring affects them all. The effect size is typically small to medium. Cohen's D between 0.3 and 0.7. But in contexts where the stakes are high, even a small bias creates massive consequences. A 10% shift in a billion-dollar negotiation isn't small. It's millions. Verdict. Validated. This one is rock solid. Anchoring has been replicated over 100 times across decades of research. It's not controversial in the scientific community. It's established fact. Here's how to use this knowledge in your life. In negotiations, make the first offer. Whoever drops the anchor controls the range. If you're buying something, ignore the listing price entirely and come in with your own independent valuation before you ever see theirs. When making estimates, project timelines, budgets, anything with numbers. Actively seek out multiple reference points. One anchor will bias you. 5 different data points will balance each other out. And here's the counterintuitive insight. Knowing about anchoring doesn't make you immune to it. Studies show the effect persists even when people are warned. The only defense is process. Deliberately generating your own numbers before exposure to external anchors. The first number wins. Make sure it's yours. Topic 3. The availability heuristic. What the book says. Kahneman asks a simple question. Are there more words in English that start with the letter K, or more words that have K as the third letter? Most people say words starting with K are more common. They're wrong. Words with K as the third letter outnumber them by about 2 to 1. But starting K words come to mind more easily. Kitchen, king, kite. So we assume they're more frequent. This is the availability heuristic. When you judge how common or likely something is, you don't calculate probabilities. You ask yourself, how easily can I think of examples? And this creates systematic errors. Plane crashes are vivid, emotional, covered extensively by media. Car accidents are routine, forgettable, barely reported. So people fear flying more than driving, even though driving is statistically far more dangerous. Shark attacks terrify us. Heart disease kills 1,000 times more people, but generates 1,000 times less fear. Whatever is memorable feels probable. Whatever is forgettable feels rare. What science says. The availability heuristic is one of Kahneman and Tversky's most validated discoveries. The original research dates back to 1973, and it's been replicated consistently for over 50 years. Multiple meta-analyses confirm the effect across different populations and contexts. But here's where it gets interesting. Researchers have documented real-world consequences that go far beyond laboratory experiments. Studies show that media coverage measurably distorts risk perception. After extensive news coverage of a rare disease, people dramatically overestimate their chances of getting it. After a terrorist attack, people avoid subways and planes and die in car accidents instead. Lichtenstein and colleagues found that people overestimate dramatic causes of death by up to 300%, while underestimating common killers like diabetes and stroke. The effect extends to professional judgment. Doctors who recently saw a rare diagnosis become more likely to diagnose it again, not because it's more common, but because it's more available in memory. Investors overweight recent market events when predicting future performance. Availability doesn't just bias individuals, it biases entire societies. Verdict. Validated. Decades of evidence, real-world impact confirmed. The availability heuristic is scientifically bulletproof. It explains why our fears are so poorly calibrated to actual risks, and why media coverage shapes public policy more than statistics do. Here's how to defend yourself against it. When you catch yourself estimating how likely something is, stop and ask, am I judging probability, or am I judging how easily I can remember examples? Those are completely different questions, but your brain treats them as the same. Actively seek out the data you're not seeing. If plane crashes dominate your mental landscape, look up actual fatality rates per mile traveled. If a particular crime feels like it's everywhere, check the actual statistics for your area. The numbers almost never match your intuition. And be especially suspicious of any judgment made right after consuming news or social media. Your availability is being manipulated. Vivid stories are overriding statistical reality. The question isn't, can I think of examples? The question is, how common is this actually? Train yourself to ask the second one. Topic 4. The Representativeness Heuristic. What the book says. This might be Kahneman's most famous example. Linda is 31 years old, single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice. Now, which is more probable? A. Linda is a bank teller. B. Linda is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement. If you're like 85% of people, including students at Stanford and Berkeley, you chose B. And you violated basic logic. It's impossible for bank teller and feminist to be more probable than just bank teller. Every feminist bank teller is also a bank teller. The smaller category can't be larger than the category that contains it. This is elementary probability. But Linda sounds like a feminist. The description is representative of that stereotype. So our brains say B feels more right and override mathematical certainty. Kahneman calls this the conjunction fallacy. We judge probability by resemblance, not by logic. What science says. The Linda problem is one of the most replicated findings in cognitive psychology. Tversky and Kahneman first published it in 1983, and the results have been consistent ever since. Roughly 85% of participants choose the logically impossible answer. The effect holds across cultures, education levels, and even when real money is at stake. A 2024 replication study tested the original set of representativeness problems. 8 out of 9 replicated successfully, including the Linda problem with nearly identical error rates to the 1983 study. What makes this finding so robust is that it's not subtle. People aren't making small errors. They're confidently choosing answers that violate basic probability axioms. And they do it consistently. Researchers have tried different framings. They've used physics problems, medical scenarios, betting situations. The conjunction fallacy appears across all of them. When a description matches a stereotype, that match overrides logic, even when the logic is simple enough for a child to understand. This isn't ignorance. It's how representativeness hijacks judgment. Verdict: strongly validated. 85% error rate consistently replicated for over 40 years. The representativeness heuristic is as solid as behavioral science gets. We judge probability by how well something matches our mental image, not by actual statistical likelihood. This creates a specific blind spot: base rate neglect. We ignore how common something actually is because the description feels so fitting. Here's a practical example. You meet someone at a tech conference who's quiet, wears glasses, and loves puzzles. Is this person more likely to be a software engineer or a salesperson? Your brain screams engineer, but salespeople dramatically outnumber engineers in the general population. The base rate matters, and we almost always ignore it. How to apply this? Whenever you're making a judgment about probability, force yourself to ask 2 separate questions. First, how well does this match my stereotype? Second, how common is this category in the real world? The first question is what your brain naturally answers. The second question is what actually determines probability. Train yourself to answer both and trust the second one more. Resemblance is not probability. Stop letting your intuition pretend otherwise. Topic 5. Loss aversion. The Nobel Prize work. What the book says. Here's the discovery that won Kahneman the Nobel Prize in economics, despite him never taking an economics class. Traditional economics assumed humans are rational. Given a choice, we calculate expected value and pick the option that maximizes our gains. Kahneman and Tversky proved this is fundamentally wrong. Consider this bet. A coin flip. Heads, you win $150. Tails, you lose $100. Expected value is positive. A rational person should take this bet every time. Most people refuse. Why? Because losses hurt more than equivalent gains feel good. Kahneman found the ratio is roughly 2 to 1. Losing $100 feels about as bad as winning $200 feels good. This asymmetry, loss aversion, explains countless irrational behaviors that economists couldn't understand. It's why people hold losing stocks too long, hoping to avoid realizing the loss. Why they refuse fair gambles. Why the pain of losing $50 ruins a day that finding $50 would only mildly improve. We're not maximizing gains. We're minimizing losses. And those are very different strategies. What science says. This is where Kahneman's work stands strongest. In 2020, Ruggeri and colleagues published a massive replication study in Nature Human Behavior. They tested prospect theory across 4,098 participants in 19 countries, speaking 13 different languages. The result? 94% of the original findings replicated. 12 out of 13 theoretical predictions held up perfectly. This isn't a single study. This is thousands of studies over 4 decades confirming the same pattern. Loss aversion has been documented in finance, health behavior, public policy, consumer decisions, and even neuroscience. Brain imaging studies show that losses and gains are processed differently at a neural level. The amygdala, your brain's threat detector, activates more strongly for potential losses than for equivalent potential gains. Some effects were slightly weaker than Kahneman originally reported, particularly for small amounts of money. But the direction is consistent. The core insight, that losses loom larger than gains, is as close to a universal finding as behavioral science has produced. This is Nobel Prize-winning work for a reason. It changed how we understand human decision-making. Verdict: strongly validated. 94% replication across 19 countries. This is foundational science. Loss aversion isn't just an academic finding. It's a lever you can use, or that can be used against you. Marketers know this. Don't miss out works better than get this bonus. Framing a discount as avoiding a surcharge is more motivating than framing it as getting a discount. The fear of losing triggers action more than the hope of gaining. In negotiations, understand that the other side feels their concessions twice as painfully as you feel your gains. What seems like a fair trade to you may feel deeply unfair to them, not because they're irrational, but because losses loom larger. For your own decisions, Watch for loss aversion distorting your judgment. Are you holding on to a bad investment because selling would realize the loss? Are you staying in a mediocre situation because leaving feels like giving something up? Here's the reframe. The loss already happened. Your stocks already dropped. Your time was already spent. The question isn't whether to lose, it's whether to keep losing. Losses hurt more. But sometimes accepting a loss is the only way to stop the bleeding.
Topic 6. Framing effects. What the book says. Imagine a disease is expected to kill 600 people. You have two programs to choose from. Program A, 200 people will be saved. Program B, there's a 1/3 chance all 600 will be saved, and a 2/3 chance no one will be saved. Most people choose A, the certain option. Save 200 for sure. Now consider the same scenario framed differently. Program C, 400 people will die. Program D, there's a 1/3 chance no one will die, and a 2/3 chance all 600 will die. Now most people choose D, the risky option. Here's the thing. A and C are identical. B and D are identical. The outcomes are exactly the same. Only the words changed. Saved versus will die. And that linguistic shift completely reversed people's preferences. This is framing. Objectively identical information, presented differently, produces opposite decisions. And Kahneman argues this isn't a minor quirk. It's a fundamental feature of how humans process choices. We don't evaluate outcomes. We evaluate descriptions of outcomes. What science says. The Asian disease problem. That's what researchers call this experiment, is one of the most replicated findings in all of psychology. Tversky and Kahneman published it in Science in 1981. Since then, it's been tested hundreds of times across different cultures, contexts, and stakes. The effect holds up consistently. In 2020, researchers replicated it using COVID-19 as the disease instead of a hypothetical Asian flu. Same result. Real pandemic, real fear, same framing effect. A 2023 study at the University of Utah tested 1,209 participants across all socioeconomic groups. The framing effect appeared in every single demographic. Rich, poor, educated, uneducated, everyone was susceptible. Data Colada, a research integrity watchdog, specifically tested whether the effect survives rigorous methodology. They added the word exactly to make the numbers more precise. The effect remains statistically significant at p less than 0.001. This finding is the foundation of prospect theory. It directly demonstrates loss aversion in action. Gain frames trigger risk aversion. Loss frames trigger risk-seeking. The Nobel Prize Committee cited this work specifically when awarding Kahneman in 2002. Verdict: strongly validated. This is Nobel Prize-level science, replicated for over 40 years. Framing effects have massive real-world implications, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. In healthcare, doctors who say 90% survival rate get different patient decisions than doctors who say 10% mortality rate. Same information, different choices. Studies show this affects whether patients choose surgery, chemotherapy, and experimental treatments. In policy, tax relief versus tax cuts versus reduced government revenue triggers completely different political reactions.
even when describing identical proposals. In marketing, 95% fat-free sells better than 5% fat. Don't miss this deal outperforms get this bonus. The frame is the message. Here's how to apply this. When making important decisions, deliberately reframe the options. If something is presented as a gain, ask yourself how it looks as a potential loss. If it's presented as avoiding loss, ask what you're gaining. Force yourself to see both frames before deciding. Because whoever controls the frame controls the choice. And right now, that's usually not you. The facts don't speak for themselves. The frame speaks for the facts. Topic 7. Overconfidence bias. What the book says. Kahneman calls overconfidence the mother of all biases, and he doesn't say that lightly. Here's a simple test. Answer 10 general knowledge questions, and for each answer, give a 90% confidence interval. A range you're 90% sure contains the correct answer. If your confidence is well calibrated, you should get about 9 out of 10 right. Most people get around 5. This isn't just being wrong. It's being wrong while feeling certain you're right. Your subjective confidence dramatically exceeds your objective accuracy. And this gap appears everywhere Kahneman looked. He describes 3 types of overconfidence. Overestimation, thinking you'll perform better than you actually will. Overplacement, thinking you're better than others when you're not. And overprecision, being too certain your beliefs are correct. That last one is the killer. It's not that we're occasionally too confident. We're systematically, predictably, almost universally too confident. Experts, amateurs, professionals, students, everyone shows the same pattern. What science says. Overconfidence is one of the most extensively documented findings in all of psychology. Over 50 years of research confirms it. The classic study by Alpert and Rafa in 1982 established the confidence interval problem. When people give 90% confidence ranges, the true answer falls inside only about 50% of the time. This has been replicated dozens of times with consistent results. Oskamp's 1965 study on clinical psychologists found something disturbing. As psychologists received more information about a case, their confidence increased from 33% to 53%. But their accuracy? It stayed flat at under 30%. More information made them more confident, not more correct. Perhaps the most famous finding. Svensson in 1981 asked drivers to rate their driving ability. 93% rated themselves above the median. Mathematically impossible. Statistically hilarious. Psychologically universal. The effect appears across professions. Doctors overestimate diagnosis accuracy. Lawyers overestimate case outcomes. CEOs overestimate merger success. Investors overestimate their stock-picking ability. The more complex the domain, the wider the confidence accuracy gap becomes. Verdict. Strongly validated. 50+ years of evidence across every domain tested. Overconfidence isn't a personality flaw. It's a feature of human cognition. And it's probably the most expensive bias you have. Think about what overconfidence costs. Projects that run over budget and over schedule. That's overconfidence in planning. Businesses that fail because founders underestimated competition. That's overconfidence in strategy. Investments that lose money because you were sure you'd spotted a winner. That's overconfidence in prediction. Here's how to fight it. First, track your predictions. Write down what you expect to happen and with what probability. Then check back. Most people have never actually measured their forecasting accuracy, which is exactly why overconfidence survives. Second, use the outside view. Don't ask, how long will my project take? Ask, how long do projects like this typically take? Base rates beat intuition. Third, widen your confidence intervals. Whatever range you think is reasonable, make it wider. If you're 90% confident, you're probably only 60% accurate. The goal isn't to eliminate confidence, it's to calibrate it. Know what you know, but more importantly, know what you don't. Topic 8. The priming disaster. What Kahneman got wrong. What the book says. Chapter 4 of Thinking, Fast and Slow describes some of the most fascinating experiments in the book. In one study, people who were asked to read words associated with old age, Florida, forgetful, wrinkle, actually walked slower down the hallway afterward. Their bodies physically aged just from reading words. In another, people who held a warm cup of coffee rated strangers as having warmer personalities than people holding cold cups. Temperature primed social judgment. In yet another, people who were shown images of money became more selfish, less helpful, and preferred to work alone. Just seeing money changed their behavior. Kahneman called this social priming, the idea that subtle cues in your environment unconsciously shape your behavior in powerful ways. He wrote about these studies with confidence, citing them as evidence of how System 1 operates beneath our awareness. These experiments became famous. They were cited in TED Talks, business books, and self-help articles everywhere. There was just one problem. They weren't true. What science says. Starting around 2012, researchers began trying to replicate these famous priming studies. The results were devastating. Doyen and colleagues at the Université Libre de Bruxelles attempted to replicate the elderly walking study in 2012. They added a critical control. They made sure the researchers timing the walk didn't know which words the participants had read. The effect vanished completely. The original finding was likely experimenter bias, not priming. The money priming studies? A comprehensive analysis by Shimek and colleagues calculated something called an R index, a measure of how replicable a set of findings is. Chapter 4 of Kahneman's book scored 14 out of 100. For context, anything below 50 suggests the findings are essentially unreliable. Study after study failed to replicate. The warm coffee effect, the cleanliness priming, the money priming. All of them collapsed under rigorous testing. This wasn't a minor correction. This was a train wreck. And remarkably, the person who used that exact phrase was Kahneman himself. Verdict: not validated. Chapter 4's priming examples have an R index of 14, essentially zero reliability. But here's what makes this story fascinating rather than just embarrassing. In 2012, when the replication failures became clear, Kahneman didn't defend the research. He didn't attack the critics. He wrote an open letter to the priming research community, calling the situation a train wreck, and acknowledging he had placed too much faith in underpowered studies. A Nobel Prize winner publicly admitted he was wrong. That's rare. That's intellectually honest. And ironically, it proves the very point his book makes. Kahneman fell victim to the same biases he documented. Availability heuristic. Vivid priming studies were memorable, so they seemed more reliable. Confirmation bias. The results fit his theory, so he believed them. The illusion of validity. The studies formed a coherent story, which felt like truth. The lesson isn't that Kahneman is unreliable. The lesson is that even geniuses get fooled. And science works precisely because it eventually catches these errors. Skip Chapter 4. Trust the other 93%. And remember, if a Nobel laureate can be wrong about something, so can you. Stay humble. Validation score recap. So let's step back and look at the full picture. I tested 14 of Daniel Kahneman's core claims against peer-reviewed research, including studies published after the book came out, and the brutal replication crisis that shook psychology to its core. Here's the final scorecard. Validated, 13 claims, 93% of the book. System 1 versus System 2. The dual process framework is well established across cognitive science. Validated. Anchoring effect. Over 100 replications. Works on experts and novices alike. Validated. Availability heuristic. 50 years of evidence. Real-world impact confirmed. Validated. Representativeness and the conjunction fallacy. 85% error rate, replicated for 4 decades. Validated. Prospect theory and loss aversion. 94% replication across 19 countries, over 4,000 participants. This is Nobel Prize-winning science. Strongly validated. Framing effects. Same information, different words, opposite decisions. Replicated hundreds of times. Validated. Overconfidence bias, the mother of all biases, 50 years of evidence across every domain. Validated. Hindsight bias, sunk cost fallacy, planning fallacy, regression to the mean, all validated with extensive research. What failed? Not validated, one claim, 7% of the book. Social and behavioral priming. The elderly walking study. The money priming. The warm coffee effect. Chapter 4's examples have an R index of 14 out of 100, essentially zero reliability. These findings collapsed completely under replication attempts. And Kahneman himself acknowledged it, calling the research a train wreck. The bigger lesson. But here's what makes this story remarkable. 93% of a book, written by a Nobel laureate, holds up under rigorous scientific scrutiny. That's extraordinary. Most popular psychology books don't come close to that number. And the 7% that failed, it actually teaches us something important. Science isn't about being right forever. It's about self-correction. The replication crisis didn't destroy psychology. It cleaned house. Bad studies got caught. Methods improved. And researchers like Kahneman showed intellectual honesty by admitting their mistakes publicly. The fact that we know Chapter 4 is unreliable is proof that science works. It just takes time. Final verdict. Thinking Fast and Slow earns a 93% validation score. This isn't just a good book. It's one of the most important psychology books ever written, authored by the actual researcher, not a journalist summarizing someone else's work. The core ideas, prospect theory, heuristics and biases, System 1 and System 2. These are foundational to behavioral economics, public policy, medicine, and business. Skip Chapter 4. Trust the rest. And remember Kahneman's ultimate lesson. Even the smartest people fall for cognitive biases, including him, including you. The goal isn't to eliminate biases, it's to recognize them and build systems that protect you from your own brain.
30-day action plan.
Here's a 30-day plan to actually apply Kahneman's validated insights. No priming pseudoscience, no Chapter 4 nonsense. Just the 93% that holds up turned into daily practice. Week 1. Recognize your two systems. Week 1 is about awareness. Your only job this week is to catch yourself operating in System 1. Notice when you're making automatic judgments, snap decisions, gut reactions, instant opinions. Before any important decision, pause and ask, am I in System 1 or System 2 right now? If you're tired, rushed, stressed, or multitasking, System 1 is running the show. Practice this. Once per day, when you notice a quick judgment, stop and deliberately engage System 2. Don't act on the first impulse. Analyze it. This builds the habit of recognizing which system is in control. Week 2. Catch the heuristics. For availability bias, when you estimate how likely something is, ask, what data am I not seeing? If your judgment is based on recent news or vivid memories, it's probably distorted. For anchoring, before any negotiation or estimate, generate your own number first, before you see theirs. Write it down. The first number anchors everything that follows. Make sure it's yours. For representativeness, when judging probabilities, force yourself to check base rates. Ask, how common is this category actually? Don't let stereotypes override statistics. Practice this. Keep a small note on your phone. Every time you catch a heuristic in action, log it. Awareness is the first defense. Week 3. Apply loss aversion consciously. Week 3 is about using prospect theory. First, watch for loss aversion distorting your own decisions. Are you holding on to something bad because letting go feels like losing? The loss already happened. Continuing doesn't undo it. Second, reframe your options deliberately. If a choice is presented as a gain, ask how it looks as a potential loss. If it's framed as avoiding loss, ask what you're gaining. See both frames before deciding. Third, in any negotiation or persuasion, remember, losses hit twice as hard as gains. Frame your proposals in terms of what the other person avoids losing, not just what they gain. Practice this. Take one decision you've been postponing. Write it out in both gain frame and loss frame. Notice how your preference shifts. Week 4. Calibrate your confidence. Week 4 attacks the mother of all biases. Start tracking your predictions. Write down what you expect to happen this week, with percentages. Then check back. Most people have never measured their actual accuracy. This is how overconfidence survives unchallenged. For any project or plan, use the outside view. Don't ask, how long will my project take? Ask, how long do projects like this typically take? Base rates beat intuition. Widen your confidence intervals. If you're giving estimates, add buffer. If you think something will take 2 weeks, plan for 3. Your 90% confidence is probably 60% accurate. Practice this. At the end of week 4, review your prediction log. Calculate your actual hit rate. This single exercise will permanently improve your judgment calibration.
So here's my question for you. You've just learned that your brain runs on shortcuts, that you feel losses twice as hard as gains, that your confidence exceeds your accuracy, that the first number you see anchors every number after, that vivid memories distort your sense of probability. You now know more about how your mind actually works than 99% of people. But knowledge isn't the same as change. Kahneman himself, the man who documented these biases, fell for them anyway. He believed the priming research because it fit his theory. He trusted underpowered studies because they told a good story. A Nobel Prize didn't make him immune. So the question isn't whether you have biases. You do. I do. Everyone does. The question is, what will you do differently starting tomorrow? Will you pause before snap decisions? Will you check base rates before trusting stereotypes? Will you ask what data you're not seeing? Will you track your predictions and face your actual accuracy? The research is clear. The applications are practical. The only variable left is you. Kahneman gave us the map. Whether you follow it, that's your call. And speaking of biases that affect our decisions, next video is going to challenge everything you think you know about money. Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money has sold over 4 million copies. It's become the go-to book for understanding why smart people make dumb financial decisions. But here's the thing. Housel makes some bold claims about wealth, luck, and human behavior. Some are backed by decades of research. Others? They're more philosophy than science. I tested every major claim against peer-reviewed research. Some of it will change how you think about money forever. Some of it will surprise you. If you want to see that video when it drops, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Every video, I take a bestseller, test the claims, and show you what actually works. Drop a comment. Which Kahneman insight are you implementing first? Loss aversion? The outside view for planning? Catching your heuristics? I read every single one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.